Hello, I'm Graham Taylor and you're watching Potted History. In this video I'm going to be looking at Roman head pots, one of my favourite types of Roman pottery. Now I know I've said that about Roman hunt cups and that still stands absolutely, Barbertine hunt cups, etc. But along with those head pots, and I know that for some of the Roman pottery specialists out there, head pots are very definitely their favourites. They occur certainly all over Roman Britain, but they also occur all over the continent, into North Africa, across Pompeii. Italy has yielded head pots. And in fairness, people seem to be putting faces on pots, basically as long as there have been pots. There are some Neolithic pots that do have faces on. So I think the form does lend itself to the idea that it's a human head and that you can model the features of the head onto there. These are often found as burial items in funerary contexts, often used as cremation urns. But they have occurred in more domestic environments and inside Roman forts, etc. So we don't entirely know their function. We know that some of them are used as funerary urns, but some of them seem to have been used as storage jars, etc. Faces placed on pots are often deemed to be protective. They may be of deities, and certainly in some cases they carry the attributes of deities. And I'm going to be making one that is from a sherd that's in the collection of the Great North Museum, the Hancock, in Newcastle on Tyne. Came from Hadrian's Wall, and it does have certain attributes that I think lend it to being a deity. This style here can often be seen carrying Vulcan's attributes of things like tongs and hammer. So they definitely do on occasion represent deities. We don't know that they always do. It was sometimes thought that they might represent the occupant of the grave, although since there's a very standardized, sort of stylized way of making these, I don't think that's the case with these, possibly more so with the more elaborately modelled ones. And in North Africa there were even moulded ones. But they are something that I tend to seek out when I visit Roman pottery collections around Britain, and I tend to photograph them. So shall we have a look at some of the originals that I've photographed as I've gone round? I think the simplest design or style of working that I've seen on head pots as I've travelled around the country and looked at ones in collections are possibly some of the first ones that I ever saw, which were at Chester's Roman fort on Hadrian's Wall. This one on the left here, just really a monobrow nose, 2 dots for eyes and a little tiny mouth, really looks to me as if it's probably been very quickly applied to the side of possibly a locally made vessel, and possibly is trying to emulate the style of the potters in Colchester, who were using the same style of face, but as you see here, in a rather more elaborate way. Like this group here in the Colchester Castle Museum, all of which were found in cremation burials. And I'm sure they don't represent the occupant of the pot. I'm sure they are some sort of protective deity on there, but they are literally just a monobrow applied in one piece, a nose added to it, just dots of clay for the mouth and eyes, and then a bit of detailing put in just by pressing into the eyes and mouth with slits, and then a little bit of inference of eyebrows. And here are a couple more in the Colchester Castle Museum, and this rather magnificent group, probably also Colchester pots, in the Museum of London. But far more elaborately decorated, far more complex in their creation, are pots that are modelled in their entirety to form a human head. The ones we've been looking at mostly have an applied face to them. These ones are actually developed to look like an entire human head. And these two here, one almost complete, were found at Piercebridge and are currently, I think, in the Bowes Museum in County Durham. You can see that not only have the facial features been developed far more realistically, but the form of the face, the shape of the hair, and of course the style of the hair have also been included. Two more here. The one on the left here is in the Yorkshire Museum, and the one on the right is from Lincoln. And then this one is in the Hancock Great North Museum in Newcastle on Tyne. And this is the one that I will be modelling in the next video. What interests me about this one is that while we only have a single face, the hair, which you can see to the left and right of the face there, actually divides the pot up in a way that suggests, and I'm fairly confident, that there were in fact three faces on it, because on the far left of the pot there, I don't know if you can see, but you are moving into another cheek, and you can actually see the dimple of the mouth. When you look at the original, you can see that it's developing into a dimple of the mouth, and if you look from above the pot, it divides up into three rather than into four. So I think this has been a three-faced pot, and the hair is in the form of wheat stems or grass heads, suggesting that she might be some deity such as Ceres, for instance, or possibly a local harvest deity. When we look inside the pot, now it starts to get really interesting, because you can really see the way that this pot has been manipulated. It's been wheel thrown, you can quite evidently see that. There's the rilling within the inside of the pot, but you can also see how the cheeks have been pushed out, the nose, the eye sockets pushed inwards, so the whole wall of the pot has been manipulated by the potter to reshape it before putting on the final detail on the outside of the pot. And this would have been done when the pot was relatively soft, not straight off the wheel. It would basically collapse at that stage, but when the pot's been relatively soft. And from this angle here, although the lighting's a little bit strange, you can actually see the fingernails of the potter as they worked inside the pot. Because, of course, to an extent, they will be working blind. The neck of the pot, probably quite relatively small. With your hand inside, you really can't see what you're doing. So you're sort of looking at the outside of the pot and manipulating it from the inside, and they're leaving behind the fingernail impressions. So I'm going to start off making the body for the one from the Museum of Antiquities, the Great North Museum. I've got here about 4 pounds of clay. I'm using grey clay. This will produce, well, it's actually what's known as a buff body. It's the only time I get to say I have a buff body. It's a grey clay that will fire buff coloured, and it's going to give quite a warm pinkish buff finish to the pot. As you'll see, I'm using the electric wheel again, simply for speed, simply to get things done. Don't want to be hanging around. Here we go. The base of this pot has quite a taper to it, the original. It's fairly unusual. They're usually fairly straight at the bottom, but it does narrow in quite a lot towards the base from just under the chin, so I'm going to try and emulate that. I've got a little bit of a wobble in it there, not too worried, that's fine. What I might expect if I was throwing it on a stick wheel. I'm just going to bring that top in a little bit. There we go. And I want quite a bulbous face area for this pot. I'm throwing it relatively thin. You've seen on the photographs there how the main features of the face have been pinched out from the body of the pot. So the body of the pot, the needs to be relatively thin to be able to do that. Some parts will be added on, but a fair few of those features are done simply by pinching out from the body of the pot itself. If you're wondering why I keep glancing to my left, that's because I've got a picture up there of the original. I'm just trying to make sure that I'm heading in the right direction for the form that I want. There we go, that'll do. As I say, I'm not going for a 100% exact replication of every last detail of that pot. What I try to do always is to work so that I'm working in the spirit of the original pot. I'm working to create a pot which has the same sort of life and feeling that the original pot has. And that really doesn't come if you're trying to make sure that every last single stroke and mark is in exactly the same place as on the original. So, that one done. Cut it through. Dry my hands a little bit. Lift it off. And I'll put it just over there. Ready to work on. And here you can see what I'm doing is I'm starting off forming the hair, in actual fact, the hairstyle of the pot, which comes right down to wrap around the face. So on one side, I'm starting off just with the wet finger on the inside of the pot and pulling my hand up from the bottom, pushing outwards, being careful not to push through because, as I say, it is actually a relatively thin pot. And as I do that, it does tend to crack up a little bit on the outside. So here you can see what I'm doing is I'm trying to get the divisions. I'm trying to work out the three areas where I'm going to have to apply the hairstyle, leaving me three areas to put the faces in. And I've just done that, simply wet finger and mark them as I go round. So I'll have a bit of high speed here as I work through and I get that hairstyle in place. On the original, as I say, the one face that remains, the hairstyle is wheat stems. However, it's quite apparent that the next face isn't. It seems to just have sort of zigzag lines. So that's what I'll be applying as I go on. So here what I'm doing now is defining the face. So I'm using my fingernail, working round the area that will be the face of the first face that I'm going to apply, and then moving on to the second one. This is leaving these sideburns, these areas of hair that come down the sides of the faces. They're not sideburns because these are fairly apparently female faces, so it is a hairstyle that wraps right around the face. Next job, push out chins. So I'm working round the pot again, wet finger on the inside, pushing out what will be the chin. As you can see, I've sort of made the pot with a neck and a sort of fairly voluminous head, but the features like chin and here the nose that I'm starting to put in, and then marking the positions of the eyes just by using wet thumbs and then pushing inwards to make the eye sockets. And these are all techniques that I'm fairly certain the Roman potters used. You can see their finger marks on pots. You can see where they've done these same processes, just defining where the face is going to go. And you end up with something that looks a little bit like some kind of Doctor Who type character, because quite frankly it's there, but it's not clearly defined. So the cheeks come out. And as you do this, you start to see sort of more realistic faces appearing bit by bit. It always pleases me to see this process develop and evolve and know that I'm seeing what a Roman potter saw nearly 2,000 years ago as they work through the same processes. So again, going back and applying more detail, just going round the edges of the hair there, the edges of the face, to really define them. And there, looking inside the pot, you can see those forms, those the same forms that you're seeing on the inside of the pot here, you're seeing on the inside of the original. You can see the rilling from my fingers when I threw the pot, but you can also see the pinching and tweaking of eye sockets, nose, lips, chin, etc. inside there. Another bit of speed work here, putting in the lips, tweaking the cheeks, the nose, the eyebrows, etc. Now, the noses, we don't have enough clay in the pot to be able to push the nose out as far as it needs to go. And the nose on this pot is quite prominent. So what I'm doing is I'm wetting it, scratching the surface of the clay a little bit, making a key, and rolling a small amount of clay, which I'm then going to attach onto there. And I don't try and form the shape of a nose first. I stick the clay on, and once the clay's on there, then I start to shape it into what I require. And as I say, it is quite a prominent nose, and you can see from the inside of the original pot that it is partially worked out from the inside of the pot, but not entirely. So clay's definitely been added onto the outside to achieve the effect that they wanted. And again, same with the lips now, adding a little bit of clay where the lips are going to go and just shaping that into place. At this stage, it only has to be very basic. It doesn't have to, have a finished quality to it. I'm just trying to get all the material in the right places. Now, of course, the difference between the way I'm working and the way the original potter would have worked, almost certainly they were not working from a drawing or anything like that. They certainly weren't working from a photograph. They may, I suppose, there may have been a sort of a workshop archetype, the pot that was kept, that they would work from each time. But I think it's much more likely that the potters had their own style of working, and that each pot was done more or less as an individual piece. Here we go with the eyes. So eyes are being pushed out there. So we get in the bulge of the eyes, which again will have clay applied to them. They'll be trimmed into in order to get the final effect of the eyes that we want. Now, if you go around Roman collections, Roman museums, you are going to see lots and lots and lots of head pots. The ones where they are modelled out from the body of the pot itself do tend to be more, I suppose, individualistic, creative. It's very rare, I think, to see two that have similar features, similar styles, whereas that's not true of the Colchester ones. The Colchester type, you do, the style is very much the same over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pots. The facial features the same. It does seem to be much more of a production line thing, and I suspect that these pots that I'm the modelled faces, the ones that are worked out from the body of the pot, may well have been, some of them may well have been commissions. I do believe them to be, or some of them at least, to be deities. They carry the attributes of deities, and as I say, this one here has sort of grain or wheat straw as its hair, which suggests it might be something like Ceres, or possibly a local harvest goddess. She now looks a little bit like she's got a moustache here, but this is me starting to develop the lips and work them up towards the style of the original. Now, what I'm basically doing from this point on is working on the one face, the face that I'm intending to be the replica of the existing face from this pot, and then I'm going to go around and develop the other faces to go alongside it. So that's the point at which I'm have allowed myself a little creativity. Two pieces of clay for the lips, upper and lower lips separately. There you go. Now, and that really does make quite a change to how the face looks and how realistic it looks. Constantly looking back at the photograph in order to check that I'm headed down the right right lines. That photograph I'm working from in the background is actually one that I took when the pot was in the Museum of Antiquities, and I'm not sure how many years ago that was. It's probably about 20 years ago, I'm guessing. You'll notice I'm not always scratching and attaching. One of the things we always say to people in workshops is when you're applying clay to the surface, wet it, scratch it and attach it. So you build up a little bit of slip, you actually scratch the surface to give a key, and then you apply the clay. In this case, firstly, it's very small pieces of clay. I'm quite confident that the clay is wet in it, to stick together. But I'm also going to work around these that sort of works the edges in, so there's almost no possibility they can come off. And as you can see, what I'm starting to do here is to build up the details of the eyes, and I'm doing that using the bone tool here. The tools I'm using are all tools that are based on an assortment of finds. They're not finds from any specific site. They are finds of tools that I've seen in museums around the country. The museum in Edinburgh has a fine collection of bone and horn tools of various kinds, and a lot of them we don't know. We don't know whether they were potter's tools, what they were, and there's really very little evidence of definite potter's toolkits from around the Roman world. But the tools I use, the tools I make, I try to use materials that would have been accessible to the Romans, and I also base them, of course, on tools that will make the same types of marks that I'm seeing on the original pieces. The eyes on this pot do seem to be sort of bigger than they should be for the face, but I think that's quite common in Roman head pots. There's sort of what you might suspect are supposed to be sort of lashes, but they're way too high. They're up sort of just below where the eyebrows would be, or maybe they are supposed to be the eyebrows, or maybe there's supposed to be some kind of makeup. It's hard to know, but they do sort of highlight the eyes, and they do draw attention to the eyes. And then there is a line above the top of the eye socket there, which is almost certainly supposed to be the eyebrow. So if you were sort of considering those dots to be actual eyelashes, then of course they should go along the top rim of the eye rather than quite so high in the socket. But again, that's, creativity going on within the original piece. And again, what I'm always trying to do is I'm trying to get the essence of the pot. I'm trying to get a pot which relates very closely to the original pot, but isn't so constrained that it loses all its vitality. Here we go. The eyes, the irises and the pupils just drawn in. They are drawn in using a tool, and then the pupils of the eyes put in, and again brings the face to life a little bit as you do that. Okay, so what I'm starting to do here now is I'm starting to apply the hairstyle, and as I said, the one remaining face that's there, the hair is composed of what are fairly obviously stems of grain, wheat, whatever else it might be. So I'm starting off with effectively the stalks of that grain, which already starts to give some idea of what's happening with the hairstyle. But then each of those stalks has wheat heads on it, and that's applied just with the tip of a tool, just pressing in bit by bit by bit. And we're going to go a bit speeded up, because otherwise we'll be sitting here forever watching me do this. But as you can see, just using the tip of the tool to press in, is already creating that effect that you've got in the original pot. There we go. Ceres making her appearance, and then just the sort of grass or the leaves of the wheat or corn there going in, just quite loosely applied. And then the one other face we do have has hair like that, so I've sort of assumed that that's what the other one will be, and I've worked around putting in the other faces doing the same sort of way, working the same sort of way. Okay, the philtrum. There we go. There's a nice bit of terminology for you. She gets her philtrum, and then she gets the top edge of her lips defined a little bit. Almost gives her a sneer. It's not quite, but just defining parts of the lips with a line to strengthen them. This is one of my favourite head pots, I have to say. My other favourite of this type is from Piercebridge, and I think currently resides in the Bowes Museum, or certainly did a little while ago, and I will probably at some stage do a demo of making that one. So there we are, there she is, and then very quickly how I dealt with the other faces. Having done the first face, it became a little bit easier to work on the others, because you start to get a feel for the pot and for where things belong and just how you want it finished. I think the sort of overall detailing of each of the faces would have been in similar style, but you can see there just changing the expression a little bit. Okay, so there it is, pretty much finished the way I wanted it to be. As I say, one of my absolute favourite Roman head pots.